Wear the crown, conquer nations, rule in absolute terror. It is the oldest hunger of the human heart. We claw our way to the absolute top, destroy every rival, and demand the world bow at our feet. All this for a throne, and in the end it leaves you totally alone to face the blade. The hills of Shunem were alive with the terrifying thunder of bronze and iron. Tens of thousands of Philistine warriors, shields locked, spears gleaming like a forest of death, had encamped just across the valley. From his vantage point on the slopes of Mount Gilboa, King Saul looked down at the overwhelming sea of enemies. A cold, paralyzing dread gripped his chest. His breath hitched. His hands trembled against the hilt of his royal sword. For the first time in his long, blood-soaked reign, the great warrior king felt utterly helpless. He needed the God who had raised him from a humble shepherd to speak to him just once more. Saul hurried to his royal tent and fell to his knees on the dirt floor. He cried out into the empty air, "Lord, give me a sign. Tell me what to do tomorrow. Should I attack? Will we survive?" Silence, a heavy, suffocating silence pressed back against him. No voice answered from the clouds. No divine fire fell. Saul turned frantically to his high priests. Did the Urim and Thummim reveal the mind of God? The high priests lowered their heads, their faces pale with terror. "Nothing, your majesty. The heavens are like brass." Saul staggered back, clutching his head as the brutal truth crashed down on him. Years ago, Saul had hunted down and banished every medium and spirit medium in the land, purging the kingdom of sorcery. And now God was completely silent. The prophets were mute. The enemy was at the gate, breathing down his neck. Tomorrow morning the sun would rise on a battlefield stained with his blood and the blood of his sons. Pushing past his trembling guards, Saul stumbled out into the night air. The campfires flickered like a million mocking eyes. Driven mad by the silence of heaven, the desperate king made a chilling, unthinkable decision. If God refused to speak to him in the light, he would find someone who could drag the truth from the darkest depths. Saul grabbed a plain dark cloak, pulled the hood deep over his face, and turned away from his army. "Find me a woman who is a medium," Saul whispered to his 2 guards. "Find me someone who can call up the dead. Tonight we cross enemy lines." The night air was freezing, but sweat poured down Saul's face as he and his 2 guards slipped through the shadows of Mount Gilboa. Just a few miles away, the enemy campfires burned bright. A single stray patrol of Philistine scouts could mean instant discovery and death. Every snapped twig sounded like a marching battalion. Every gust of wind felt like an enemy breath on the back of his neck. They skirted the edge of the enemy lines, navigating treacherous ravines until they reached the desolate, forbidden outskirts of Endor. It was a ghost town of ruined stone huts and twisted thorn bushes, a place abandoned by the living and forgotten by the law. Saul pulled his rough cloak tighter, his royal identity stripped away. Tonight he was just a terrified, hunted man running out of time. They stopped before a low, crumbling stone dwelling. A faint, sickly green light flickered through the cracks of a heavy wooden door. Saul's guards froze, their hands gripping the hilts of their hidden daggers. "Your Majesty," one whispered, "this is madness." "We are dead men either way," Saul hissed back, his eyes burning with frantic desperation. "Open the door." The guard pushed the heavy wood. It groaned on rusted hinges, revealing a small room choked with the smoke of burning herbs and animal fat. In the center of the room, sitting over a bubbling clay basin filled with dark liquid, was an old woman with wild white hair. Slowly her crooked head turned toward the doorway, and a thin, chilling smile stretched across her withered lips. "You come seeking the dead, strangers. Do you not know that King Saul has put every medium to death? Are you trying to trap me?" Saul stepped forward, throwing back his hood, revealing his rugged, sweat-stained face and the wild terror in his eyes. "As the Lord lives, no punishment will come upon you for this. You will not die." The old woman stared up at him, her cloudy eyes recognizing the unmistakable aura of authority and the weight of a doomed ruler. She gasped, stumbling backward. "You are Saul. Why have you deceived me? You are the king." "Do not be afraid," Saul pleaded. "Tell me, what do you see? Bring up for me the man I shall name." "You know what Saul has done. Why are you setting a trap for my life to cause me to die?" Saul gripped his sword, his desperation reaching a fever pitch. "As the Lord lives, no harm will happen to you if you do this." The old woman turned back to her bubbling basin and raised her bony hands over the dark water. "Whom shall I bring up?" Saul's voice dropped to a hollow, haunted groan. "Bring up Samuel." The old woman began to chant. Her voice shifted from a raspy whisper to a harsh, unnatural drone that echoed off the damp stone walls. She threw a handful of dried roots and powdered bone into the glowing brazier, sending up a thick, choking cloud of purple smoke. The air grew instantly frigid. The breath of the 3 living occupants plumed in white frost. In the center of the room, the bubbling liquid in the clay basin violently froze, then cracked right down the middle. A deep subterranean tremor shook the foundations of the hut, vibrating straight through the soles of Saul's boots. Suddenly, the small room was plunged into an absolute, suffocating darkness. The torchlight died instantly. From the floorboards, a pale, luminescent mist began to rise, coiling and twisting into the shape of a towering human figure. The witch threw her hands over her face, dropped hard to her knees, and let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream. She scrambled backward, her voice trembling with absolute horror. "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." Saul didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the towering figure materializing in front of him. The spirit radiated a blinding, eerie light that cut through the dark room. It stood wrapped in the mantle of the old prophet. It was Samuel, the great judge and prophet. The very man who had anointed Saul with oil was standing right there. And Samuel did not look pleased. His face was carved from stone, his eyes burning with an intense, otherworldly fury. The spiritual weight pressed down heavily. Saul's guards collapsed to the floor, gasping for air as if drowning in a vacuum. Saul's knees buckled. The mighty king of Israel fell flat on his face, with his forehead pressed hard against the dusty floor. He was paralyzed by a fear greater than death itself, a terrifying realization of a soul caught red-handed by eternity. From the center of the pale mist, a voice like rolling thunder cold, heavy, and echoing from the grave filled the room. "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" The heavy stone floor felt like ice against Saul's cheek as he lay sprawled out in the dirt, completely paralyzed by the prophecy of his doom. The spirit of Samuel vanished into the thinning purple smoke, leaving behind an oppressive, suffocating quiet. The phantom was gone, but his final words echoed endlessly in the dark. "Tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me." The old witch crawled out from the shadows of the corner, her body shaking like a leaf. She crept over to where the mighty king of Israel lay defeated, his chest barely rising and falling. She looked down at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and deep, unexpected pity. She had risked her life to perform the forbidden rite, but seeing the ruined giant broken before her, her voice soft to a raspy whisper. "Look," she urged, gently nudging his armored shoulder. "Your servant has obeyed your voice. I have put my life in my hand and listened to the words which you spoke to me. Now therefore, please listen also to the voice of your servant. Let me set a morsel of bread before you, and eat that you may have strength when you go on your way." Saul squeezed his eyes shut, turning his face away. "I will not eat." His 2 guards scrambled up from the floor, their faces pale as ghosts, and joined the old woman in pleading with him. They dropped to their knees, begging the broken king to take just a single bite of food before facing the night. Worn out by the sheer terror of the vision, the sleepless nights, and the crushing weight of his sins, Saul finally relented. He allowed them to lift him off the cold floor. He sat heavily on a wooden stool while the witch quickly killed a fattened calf she kept in the back. Kneading flour and baking unleavened bread over an open hearth, she set the meager meal before him. Saul forced down a few small bites of bread and meat, the bitter taste of a last supper on his tongue. When he finished, he stood up, pulled his dark cloak back over his head, and looked down at the old woman one last time. There were no words left to say the crown was lost. The dynasty was finished. Tomorrow awaited. Together with his terrified guards, Saul stepped out of the wretched stone hut and back into the freezing, starless night of Endor. They turned their faces toward Mount Gilboa and began the long, agonizing march back to a doomed camp. They walked in absolute silence, swallowed entirely by the dark, marching straight toward a sunrise that would write their names in blood and dust. Saul pressed his face harder into the cold dirt, his entire body trembling so violently that his armor clinked against the stone floor. He felt small, microscopic, stripped of every ounce of power, pride, and royalty. "I am in great distress," Saul sobbed, his voice cracking. "The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me. He no longer answers me, not by prophets, not by dreams. So I have called you to tell me what I must do." The spectral figure of Samuel did not soften. The prophetic mantle draped over his shoulders seemed to pulse with a cold, ghostly fire. When Samuel spoke, every word felt like a physical blow, cutting straight through the terrified king's soul. "Why do you ask me, since the Lord has departed from you and has become your enemy?" The room fell dead silent, save the ragged, panicked breathing of the guards on the floor. "The Lord has done to you what he spoke by my hand. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor, to David. Because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, he has done this thing." Saul squeezed his eyes shut, a tear cutting a clean path through the dirt on his cheek. The ghost of his old mentor pressed on, driving the final nails into his coffin with merciless clarity. "Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. Tomorrow you and your sons will be with me." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Tomorrow, not next month, not after a long campaign. Tomorrow the crown would fall, his sons would die, and he would cross over into the terrifying, irreversible realm of the dead. At that precise moment, all the remaining strength left in Saul's massive frame vanished. His muscles gave out completely. With a sickening heavy thud, the towering king of Israel collapsed flat onto his face, crashing hard against the unyielding stone floor. As the first pale light of dawn broke over the peaks of Mount Gilboa, the inevitable storm descended. The Philistine archers unleashed a devastating rain of death, and the hills ran red with the blood of Israel. True to Samuel's chilling prophecy, Saul's sons fell first, and the king himself, wounded and cornered by enemy chariots, fell upon his own sword rather than surrender. A life that began with the divine oil of anointing ended in the dust of defeat, all because a proud heart chose rebellion over repentance and silence over surrender. Subscribe to the Snoop Reader for more untold stories, dark histories, and epic tales from the ancient world. A prayer. Lord, grant us the humility to seek you in the light, the wisdom to heed your warnings before it's too late, and the grace to surrender our pride before the night overtakes us.